For many, many years, Nigerians looked forward to a time when petrol and indeed petroleum products would be readily available and, of course, affordable. Now, fuel scarcity, hoarding, rumors of pump price increase, especially at end of year or during festivities, issues of protest, disagreement over non-payment of fees between NNPC and key players in the petroleum supply chain, threats of strike, all of these were a common phenomenon in Nigeria's petroleum industry. Now, oil theft and vandalism of petroleum infrastructure have also plagued the industry here at home. And on the global scene, Nigeria has had to contend with vagaries of the oil industry, steeping oil prices and, of course, production capacity ups and cuts. Although Nigeria is ranked 6th among major oil-producing countries of the world, her national fuel requirement has still been imported. Now, may I also remind you that Nigeria's foreign exchange earnings is largely hinged on oil and gas export receipts. But of course, the sector contributes, well, less than 10%, I stand to be corrected, to the GDP. Now, against this very gloomy picture, the expectations of Nigerians in this regard when President Muhammadu Buhari came to power in 2015 and, of course, launched his change agenda can only be imagined. And in the words of former Secretary of State of, U.S. Hillary Clinton, a major oil producer that continues to import its refined petroleum products shows a sign of bad leadership. So, on Late Edition this week, we will find out how the petroleum industry in Nigeria has been integrated into the change agenda and, of course, projected outlook in the next level agenda of this administration. I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachikwu is a graduate of law at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. He has a doctorate degree also in law from Harvard and has been described as one of Nigeria's finest learned men. Now, before veering into the petroleum industry, Dr. Kachikwu worked as a banker. He was also general manager in Texaco Natural Limited, vice chairman and general counsel of ExxonMobil. He was also appointed NNPC Group Managing Director, Chairman Board of the NNPC. He became the Minister of State for Petroleum in November 2015, having relinquished his position as GMD to incumbent. He was President, OPEC 2015, President, Gas Exporting Countries Forum 2016, President, African Petroleum Producers Association 2016, and was also returned in 2019. He is a journalist, and if you're only learning now, just as I am, Dr. Kachikwu also established the, former Hints magazine. I wonder how many of us remember Hints magazine. He has been recognized with many national and international awards for distinguishing himself in his chosen career. Now, my second guest, Dr. Wumi Iledare, is a petroleum economist with equally intimidating resume. He was the first to occupy the position of President, International Association for Energy Economics, IAEE, a worldwide non-profit organization, professional organization based in the United States. Professor Iledare was also the president and senior fellow of the United States Association for Petroleum Economics. He was a director, Data and Energy Information, former director, U.S. Gulf Coast Petroleum Technology Transfer Council at Louisiana State University. Professor Iledare was team leader, Petroleum Fiscal Policy, member, Technical Advisory Team to the 8th National Assembly Committees on Petroleum Industry Reforms, expert in geopolitics of oil and gas resources and supply. He is the immediate past director of the Emerald Energy Institute, University of Port Harcourt. But most importantly, Professor Wumi Iledare was recently appointed Ghana National Petroleum Corporation GNPC Professorial Chair in Oil and Gas Economics and Management, and that's at the Institute for Oil and Gas Studies, University of Cape Coast in Ghana. Gentlemen, The pleasure is mine having both of you. Former minister now.
Yes.
Dr. Kachikwu, thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Let me start by many of us mispronounce your name, Kachikwu. Kachikwu. I would like to hear it from you.
It's Kachikwu.
Kachikwu. So I'm right.
Igbo says Kachikwu.
Yes.
The many Igbo across the Niger say Kachikwu.
Yes.
They mean the same thing.
Yes.
One with an I, one with a U.
All right. Let's get down to downstream sector. Of course,
okay.
Like I said earlier on, that's a sector that, of course, has a very gloomy picture. But that's. I must confess that the sector is now eerily quiet. It's a strange feeling, and the concern really is whether the seemingly stability in the pump price, is sustainable, and whether, of course, the NNPC and key players in the supply chain have now become bedfellows.
No, I think the thing is, and I saw the beginning trajectories and all that, those were in the past. Issue of fuel scarcity really hasn't plagued us for about 3.5 years. Issue of pipeline vandalism hasn't plagued us seriously for about 3.5 years. Stability of supply has been there. Issue of pricing through the OPEC, which we have no control over, but has at least been able to find a way of getting the OPEC family to work collectively and harmoniously. So that's kept prices a bit stable over the last 2 years, at least, depending on what you call stability. I mean, in a variance of anywhere between 55 and today I think about 68 or so.
Okay.
So largely I think the leadership of the president in this country, and obviously the work that we've done in this sector has managed to do that. Now obviously in terms of the pump price, which everybody keeps getting worried about, that's a tough one to talk about. Pump price today is 145. There isn't any conversation yet, at least as per the time that we left portfolios on changing it, but that's not to say that it is not something that worries us, because obviously the under recovery or the subsidy element is a critical norm in this country. Today the assembly I had passed or approved about 129 billion to pay the subsidy arrears for subsidy that was given out before we came in, and then announced very worrisomely that we spent about 11 trillion on subsidy over the last 6 years. First season I won't be there in 6 years, so obviously I want to believe the bulk of it happened before we came. But wherever it happened is not even the relevant factor. It's the fact that ultimately we need to address those issues. The difficulty we face in this, and I was probably one of those who succeeded working with the president to take away subsidy in 2016. I was a bit worried about the volume of subsidy areas that were there, and I just took a position that, look, no more. It just was mutating against the books and the P&L of NNPC, and then I was GMD. And so I made it up my mind I was going to take it out. And although there were reluctant persuasions here and there, we took it out. We began to have over-recovery. Subsidy went in 2016. And then consumption dropped drastically in terms of the volumes that were going across the border, because there was no more incentive to do that. Unfortunately, price of oil, obviously throughout the collective work in OPEC, ballooned, and the net effect again was that the distortion in price disparity came back. Today is, I think, landing cost of 175 naira per litre. We sell at 145. So everybody who is in private sector has left the market in terms of importation, and NPC has taken on the big burden of bringing product. But the president's first mandate is, irrespective of whatever happens, no scarcity.
Okay.
Because nobody really can deal with.
So we can beat our chest to say no scarcity.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. On fuel price,
yes.
I said there was a strange feeling that we're still maintaining 145.
Yes.
It's strange.
Yes,
Strangely
strange because there's a big distortion in terms of number, and I think Prof, when it comes to this, will probably be able to give you those sort of numbers. And strange because we know what the impact is when you have this subsidy effect. But again, every president who has tried to deal with subsidy has made roadblocks. Naming history, whether it's Abuja, whether it's Obasanjo, everybody, whether it's good luck. Probably the president was the first to take the bold step of taking it out, and we thought it was done. If we had continued with the modulation concept that we had thrown in as part of that package, which goes up and down depending on international pricing, perhaps won't be this problem today, but that's where we are.
Okay, let's put you on hold, because I would like you to explain to me, because you talked about under recovery, over recovery and all that, so we would like to understand how that differs from subsidy. Professor Iledare, what do you make of this strange feeling that we are having about 145, 142, depending on, of course, which petrol station is selling, that has subsisted so far?
Well, first, I want to commend the government of today, government of yesterday, after Jonathan, for attempting to attack some of the issues like subsidy, like upstream sector and midstream. But certainly, let me say it upfront, I will not give them B. Upstream, I will give them B, midstream, C+, and downstream, C-. And I will explain that later. They did well with taking some of the challenges in the upstream head-on. And of course, the minister is commended for what he did. The only snag is, in my opinion, is that they did not take the opportunities they had to solve some of the problems that we are still grappling with. And it has to do with the Petroleum Governance Bill. They stood on the fence instead of putting their end in and work with the National Assembly to push it. And that's why we see have the problem that we have. I'll talk about midstream and downstream. But I want to look at the entire sector to start with. So the upstream issue, they would have done excellently well if they had not let the governance issue go down the drain. Because you have those windows of opportunity where investment could have come to the country and we didn't seize it.
What opportunities were those?
All right, take for example, when Shell divested its investment and NNPC decided to take the ownership, but the governance is not there with MPDC. The financial independence is not there with them. And so there was about 3 years wasted effort. But they came back and was able to resolve that. But that was a delay opportunity. Quite often, opportunity lost are always difficult to regain.
Well, isn't it also better late than never?
Well, yes, but now we have lost 3 years. And what happened between those 3 years is the price level.
Okay.
And that will bring me to midstream. There's no way the state can finance the midstream investment. But there's no way you can bring somebody to come and invest if there's no possibility of recouping your investment. And that would just remind you of the transmission in electric power, the generator, and the disco companies. It's a value chain. Optimization must be along the chain. So the midstream is very critical to be able to get the domestic benefit that you need from oil and gas business. There's nothing the government can do more there because the money is just not there. And the investment opportunity is just not in Nigeria. So somebody has to come abroad. But there must be a framework. Let me just land, because I want to commend the upstream performance of this immediate past government, because they have a petroleum policy document that was approved. They have a gas policy document that was approved. But the third document, which is actually is the investment driver, did not see the light of the day.
Okay, Dr. Kachikwu.
Let me react to that. First, much as I won't score myself or the government, but the reality is that if Prof scores the students at that sort of level, nobody's going to pass school. let's look on upstream. B+ not good enough. We took on a mountain that nobody had dealt with. Issue of financing. There was no investment in this country for 6, 7, 8 years. It was a rigless environment. Nobody was even operational on rigs. Now, no exploration going on. We dealt with financing. We began to bring in investments. We took production up to your 2.2 million barrels, which was clogged. We dealt with the militancy issue, brought back production and security in the area. We brought in finalized a GINA. Shell eventually decided to take on Bonga, which he had abandoned, we reduced the cost of doing Bonga from 22 billion right now to about 12 billion is what they're seeking, which is a 50% drop. Nobody's going to look at that and say you did not do well in upstream. That's a massive way. We took MPDC, which was doing only 50,000 barrels to 250,000 barrels a day. So the reality is that given the financial constraints the country had in terms of its own contribution, and most of these were financed through offshore JV financing, looking at finance sector rather than looking at government putting in the money, we did marvelously well. There's no doubt about that.
And this is using your 7 big wins.
Oh yes, it's all part of the 7 big wins delivery, all of them.
Yeah.
Then you go to the midstream. Midstream largely is infrastructure, and he makes the right point that if you do not have infrastructure, you can't drive both ends of the equation. Yeah. Now, infrastructural gap deficit in this country is about 30 to 40 billion. This country doesn't have it. In fact, I say every day in Federal Executive Council that look, whilst we put in a lot of money on capital infusion into agriculture, into roads, into housing, into health, into education, this money spinner sector is one area where putting in money is a problem. And if you look at our 4 years allocations, it's been very minuscule. But that's because I came in from private sector and believe that you have to drive this business, like you rightly say, from private sector perspective. I went to China, got a commitment of about 70 billion. I went to India, I went everywhere. Now we're talking to Saudi Arabia in terms of investments on refining. The private sector can raise the money if the fiscal conditions are right. And he's right therefore when he says, much as we approve petroleum policy and gas policy, fiscal. Policy, the reason why fiscal was not taken was that the National Assembly went very bullish on the fiscal bill. And we figured that rather than wait, begin to pass policies, which quite frankly, most of them you could not replicate or execute without a legal backing. You can't affect tax laws. You can't affect royalty regimes. You can't do anything unless the assembly. So whilst the petroleum policy was okay, whilst the gas policy was okay, because you can through ministerial directives begin to push on those, which we're doing, you cannot do that with fiscal. So we felt the better thing was to submit our own contributions to the assembly. We worked very rigorously. When you say we didn't touch the legal aspect, no. We worked very aggressively with the assembly. If you look at the petroleum governance bill, a lot of it is a lift from the petroleum policy and the gas policy.
I was going to ask Prof that what is it in the petroleum industry governance bill that has not been addressed with the the 7 big wins, the policies and all that?
Well, honestly, I happen to be part of the players. The petroleum policy document and the gas policy document and the petroleum governance bill, they are in tandem because they indirectly reflect with what the executive and the legislator was doing at that particular time. And that's why we thought the petroleum governance bill will sail through. The issue always has been, like we all know, when it comes to the National Assembly passing a law, we have what we call interest group all over the world. And all the interest group, depending on who has the biggest power to lobby, gets their way. And that's why, of course, we don't know what's going to happen now. But let me, again, tell the minister it's just a conversation between him and myself. If Professor Iledare gives you a B+, that's 3.5 over 4.
That's excellent.
The reason why I took the 0.5 out, I'm very cognizant of all that you mentioned. But to sustain petroleum business, you must add reserves. And if you look at the last 4 years, how many exploration wells were drilled? How many investment went into exploration, looking for additional reserve? How many? You see, the investment that were flowing to Nigeria during your regime were being brought in to develop reserves that were already discovered. And that's depletion of reserve. And that's why the 0.5 from upstream was taken from you. So I'm not going to say that the last regime did not do well. They actually brought life to the upstream sector. I only gave you the reason why I cannot give you 4 over 4, which is exploration activity, reserve replacement ratio, cost efficiency, you are improving it. but you are not where you want to be, and you yourself, you agree.
And I do agree with you that if in fact we had gone forward to finalize the PIGB, it creates a lot of certainty, yes. which will help. But what I'm saying is that you're looking at a point of absence of law. In other words, PIGB hadn't been passed. Very tasking international denominators, the cost of production, price, returns on those.
You had to do something.
You had to do something. And even within that, we stabilize your production back. We, in fact, increase it slightly. We increase reserve no matter how little. Yeah, 2 billion to 2.2 million production is not something. But certainly from a zero.
Judging from where
exactly for where you came to now, that was huge.
That is always the situation. Every time you start from a lower, every marginal improvement is good enough for you. But that's where you should have started. Yes. That's why the mark is 100% replacement ratio.
Yeah, no.
That is the target for petroleum business sustainability. And you can go and look at it. I have a graph that can show you. Yes. If you look at the different OPEC countries, you will see that their reserve replacement ratio, ours is the lowest.
So, Iledare, I'm wondering what you make of, in the absence of the governance bill, so much has been, achieved within this sector. And like I said earlier on, it's so strange that everywhere is quiet, within the petroleum industry. At least Nigerians are not saying anything, The stakeholders are themselves, probably some degree of satisfaction, with the level of operations. I'm wondering what you think of the 7 big wins. Let's take them one by one.
I think
the policy and regulation.
It's a novel idea. There are things that are achievable, even with Petroleum Act of 1969. Sorry, my voice. So, the problem is, who are the drivers? The 7 big wins are supposed to be driven from the Ministry of Petroleum. In that case, do we have competent workforce in the Ministry of Petroleum? And that's where whoever the new Minister of Petroleum was thinking in terms of building up a technical team where we have upstream, downstream, midstream, and gas. And the director for each of these must be technical people, not just anybody that has had years of experience in the something. So if the big win is supposed to deliver, there must be a teeth to bite. And the teeth to bite is through, the teeth to bite come from what I call legal framework. Because fiscal policy is not enough to do anything without the law backing it. It's gone. Now, perhaps if he's considered to have done excellently well, maybe they can give him the full minister position in the next dispensation. Otherwise, the 7 big wins become an history.
That borders on sustainability.
Exactly.
Kachikwu.
And continuity.
Yes.
Yes. Because the new minister can come because there's no legal backing. The petroleum industry governance bill.
But some of those guidelines have been gazetted. Does that give a legal backing?
Yes, policy.
Yes. Most of the policies have been approved by FEC. Or it's been gazetted, but he's right. There's a need, obviously, for taking it up the apex ladder to get it into laws. But just talking about sustainability, let me say that if you look at every component of the 7 big wins, whether it is the business environment, whether it's international operations, whether it is the governance and transparency, whether it is the security in Nigeria, on all of them, we achieved huge deliveries on the table on those. And we did that by virtually just being ebullient about it. We are aware that we're handicapped with the absence of law. But you couldn't come back and say to Nigeria, I didn't achieve, I was waiting for the Assembly to bring out law. So we drove those with policies, we drove those with ministerial directives. There's a huge, and he's right when he says there's quite a huge gap in the ministry in terms of competency levels. And we circumvented that. First of all, when I began as GM, you could see I went out to bring in quite a few people into the management of NNC to just lift the barometers of performance. Same thing I did with the ministry. We had a senior technical advisor who was in charge of fiscal issues. We had one in charge of law. We had one in charge of upstream. We had one in charge of downstream and infrastructure. So they were experts. So we basically stepped aside from what is the normal bureaucracy of the ministry. And this is probably why you saw a lot. When you look at gas flare commercialization policy, you look at Project 1000, you look at all that is driven by individuals who are very adept in this, but staying away from the mainstream ministry. But ultimately working with them, because when you do leave, those are still individuals who are going to enforce. So one of the things we did was a very high profile volume training for the ministry. Probably never ever before done, relying on the parastatals and PTDF. All of them went for courses. We worked with the head of service to ensure she posted us people. Don't send me a mathematician to come and run petroleum, or history professor, history graduate to come and do this. Apple for apple. So we ensured that we tried to bring those type of individuals, and we trained. Okay. So I think we tried to amend some of those.
All right, Dr. Emmanuel Kachikwu and Professor Iledare, I'll put you on hold for the moment. We'll take a quick short break. When we come back, we'll of course go into other sectors of the petroleum industry.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.
Advertising your goods and services on the right channel gives you an edge over your competitors. NTA News 24 has all the platforms for your target audience. The station is on DSTV channel 419, GoTV channel 46, StarTimes channel 101, and Free TV channel 703. With our digital format and wide range, we can reach your customers in next to no time. We are eager to promote your business, goods, and services. So partner with us for a very rewarding business experience. For more information, please call Henry on 0803-379-0884 or visit our office at NTA Headquarters, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. NTA News 24. News and more news.
Welcome back to Late Edition. This week I have the former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachikwu, here with me. I also have Dr. Omomi Iledare, who's also a petroleum economist. Again, gentlemen, thank you for staying tuned, staying with me on this program. Back to Dr. Kachikwu. You talked about, or you mentioned under recovery, and I'm wondering the difference, or how under recovery differs from subsidy, because NNPC being the lone importer of crude, of oil from petrol from abroad, also has shortfalls between the landing cost and of course the exchange rate at which it imports. So what do you call that NNPC receives from the government, as a shortfall?
Well, first, subsidy versus under recovery, those are verbal nomenclature, so let's just be frank about it. But what you try to distinguish is when everybody is importing, especially the private sector, and when the subsidy is given to private sector players, they get the entire volume replacement of the difference between the landing cost and the sale cost.
Bulk
is subsidized. There's a subsidy payment, there's a fee. When NNPC does it as a sole importer, the portion that it absorbs is seen as under recovery, because that's just one item of very many business lines. Let's give you an example. If, for example, from MPDC makes a profit, when you look at his P&L, some of that profit would have been applied to covering some of the subsidies. So when he declares his P&L, you see a shortfall. You see obviously a poorer performance in P&L, but it has bellied the fact that it's some of his good performing entities have used their profit to cover some of the importation that you do. So it's an under recovery of the full cost item. So it's a nomenclature. Numbers will still be the same. The net effect, if you spin it out of NNPC books, will still be the same. But that's nomenclature.
How does it utilize the under discovery?
Under discovery, under recovery.
The under recovery funds, yes.
No, I mean, you either have to get it out of your performances if you have areas that are profitable, which you're using to cover that, or you get it through specific allocation from the federal government, which is what is done in a few cases when it is run out of funds to be able to do that. But it is obviously, on one hand, if the Federation is enjoying the full benefits of this on the recovery, it's basically consuming money that it has not made. I mean, either way, that's
you know why I asked this? Because I know that some time ago, it was an issue at the National Assembly about how the NNPC utilizes its under recovery funds without appropriation, and how it relates to transparency in the sector.
Well, let me say this. Obviously, there are transparency issues in sense of are you completely 100% declaring this? But NNPC declares it 100% in his books. It is whether his P&L or his audited reports captures the whole volume of activity. That's a question. And we've tended as executive to take the position that when we are paying subsidy fee on a specific number, like we were doing in the past, like has just been approved today, about 129 billion or so, from what I hear from the news, for past arrears of subsidy. Obviously, it's gone through the National Assembly. NNPC's budget also goes to the National Assembly. And in there will also be contained the portion of money that is being utilized for subsidy issues. So, to be honest, the way I look at it is a difficult thing because you are dealing with an existential issue. If, for example, we stop importing petroleum products for 5 days while we're going through National Assembly approvals for NNPC, I think this country will close down. And the upheaval that will follow will be much more than the process issue. So, are there better ways to do it? Hopefully, if it is a continuum, as a policy, then you need to go back and seek funds to be able to cover that. If there are things, trajectories you've made by virtue of an emergency that has arisen, and NNP is the only one exposed, not that you're actually paying third parties who are private contractors, then the expectation, because I mean, last year Saudi Aramco made 200 billion. If you had a Saudi Aramco with 200 billion and it is importing a product at slightly losses, it will be 200 billion versus 150 billion. In which case we will not be having this conversation. But it is because NNP is obviously not as profitable as it should be and unable to suck in the entire effect of the importations differences, which is forced on it by existing policies. It's not like NNP doesn't want to go out and sell products at the right prices in its filling stations. But it can because of some of the social upheaval issues that the president has to deal with and consider and determine. So that's really the effect of under recovery.
Okay, Professor Iledare, what do you make of this
Yes. I think the definition is the process. If the money is paid to a third party, it's subsidy.
It's subsidy.
If the money is paid to government agency, or then it's under recovery of your asset. Okay. That's the way it's. Actually, I'm one of those who crafted the under recovery because NNPC cannot subsidize.
Okay.
Again, the most important thing is for people to look at what are the objective of a national oil company. It's completely different from the objective of an international oil company. And one of the importance of national company objective is maximize corporate social responsibility. It is not even because of the price of crude alone that NNPC has an advantage. It's because NNPC deals with revenue that is in dollar. So most of the time, the exchange rate is not necessarily an issue.
Okay. Okay, Professor Iledare, I also want you to speak to the issue of transparency and accountability. I know that, again, using the 7 big wins, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources was able to offset some of its burdens, debt burdens with the OICs in joint partnership, and it had also shifted. Somehow that, repayment of debts seem to have restored some degree of confidence and some transparency. I don't know. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, let me see what Paul says. Paul said he planted Apollo Waters. It's the same thing. I think the GMD, the former minister, could be credited to a large extent to the new transparency phenomenon that is going through NNPC at this time. Because when it came that they started publishing their financial report and so on and so on, so it's credited for that. Of course, the current GMD2 could also be applauded for continuing to do some of those things that the former minister did. When you are transparent, the ease of doing business index goes up a notch. And people will begin to take you as being serious.
The shift from JVs to IJVs, right? What can you tell us? What's the fundamental?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to IJVs. There are notions that we're hoping to pursue. And what the whole essence of IJV is that you create a lot of independence in terms of on a board structure, in terms of decision making. So some of this going through NAPIMs to seek approvals, so the board of the company will do that, and you just have an oversight through the regulatory agencies. But we haven't done that yet. It's something that we're aspiring to do.
Okay, talk to us about your Project 100. We seem to be hearing only of Dangote's activities.
No. Project 100 is an attempt to identify 100 Nigerian companies that are already there, already active in the sector, but needs to take it to the very next level in terms of exposure to business, volume of support that they need. And we're saying whatever support we give to the Dangote business that enable them get to where they are, we can also extend it, We can also extend it, frankly, to the other businesses that are available. It started from when I went last to OTC, which was about 2 years ago, and I've been in the sector for over 25, 30 years. And my worry was that each time I went to OTC, you had the highest number of attendants were from Nigerians. But you don't find them actually going to do deals. You don't find them close up, when I mean deals, close up on deals, petroleum deals. You don't find them, some people attending some of the conferences that they were meant to attend. But you had large parties and large shopping jamborees and all that stuff. So I was a bit worried. So then I announced that Nigeria was no longer going to be in the forefront of attendance of OTC. I wasn't saying OTC wasn't important. I was just saying that we needed to come back home and develop our own OTC. So we came back home and we set up what we call the NIPS, which has run now for 2 years, very successful. And the whole idea was to begin to show homegrown local content, technology, transfers, technology development, research and all that, and invite some of the OTC planners to come here. If you look at the attendance this year, we succeeded in that fairly substantially. It was from that I then engineered the concept of 100, Project 100, and saying, going from these NIPS attendances, going from the OTC type concept in Nigeria, where are the 100 companies that are either strong in engineering, strong in the business, that we can say to Shell and to the mobiles and all that stuff, you can't do this anymore. That these 100 companies handhold them and help them, saying that they're not efficient, they're not capable, is not good enough anymore. You've done this for 40 years. So if it's procurement, if it's engineering, if it's exploration, if it's diving, if it's logistics support, hold their hands. Identify for me 4 or 5 or 6 who have worked with you over the last 10 years that you can provide support for to enable them grow to the very next level. I then also went further to set a 10-year time frame within which Nigeria should be in a position to build its own FPSOs locally, even if it's with some foreign components. So that's the whole idea of the Project 100. So what do we do for them? We help them identify their business growth track. We train, because most of them are not training properly, to make sure that they have the right, just like you said, the right kind of caliber of people at the base who are going to help this company. We provide some financial support in terms of talking to banks to help give them lines. Or assessing the NCDMB $200 million fund that we're hoping to grow to about $1 billion, so that they can begin to get some sort of single-digit type interest rate loans to enable them grow in that sector. We'll try to handhold them and tie them on a joint venture relationship basis with big majors and foreign companies who have the capacity to provide depth in technical skills and growth for them. We begin to help them into African countries where they can leverage on growth.
So what has been the outcome?
Outcome is that we've done the first one. This started only about a year ago. We did the first analysis, which was done by KPMG, I think, or one of the consultants. After the first 100, we selected 60 companies who met the benchmark. They were very clear benchmark set. 60 met it. It was launched very profusely. We're working with those 60 to set up their templates, set up their databases, set up the relationships, set up the business opportunities. Now, but let me correct. People tend to come to me and say, look, okay, now you've given 60. How about the remaining 40? Project 100 is not about 100 companies. Project 100 is about 100 opportunities in the oil industry. So it could be 1,000 companies. So in fact, the more the merrier. It could be 2,000. And there's no timelining for if I did it in September, when is the next one? No. It's a day-to-day analysis. As you qualify, I think you made the benchmark, train your application, we'll look at it, see where we can support you. It is meant to help and to grow and to expand.
So what I'm wondering is if, the level of response.
Very much. The first set of applications about 3,000 companies. It was downsized to 800. From those 800, they picked the best of 60. And this was done by international consultants. And I took the ministry out of it so that nobody will complain about the parameters. I was happy that the day it was launched. Everybody, those who lost, those who selected, these companies you call, I can understand. you know, and that's the way to go. Right now it should get to a point after these ones are settled of a day-to-day application review, working with this consultant. I'm hoping that in the next level, really be able to grow those companies from about 60 there and out to about 200 to 300 of those. And each of them will find jobs along the way because you link them to real job opportunities. And that way, that forces the hands of the oil companies. And it's good for the oil companies. If you have local companies, it reduces your costs.
Yes.
It's easier to manage. There's employment in the country.
Precisely.
There's less strife in those areas. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Precisely. Professor Iledare, now I understand that the infrastructure, the supply chain infrastructures that I was talking about, the refineries, have been maintained through a model, you know, Dr. Kachikwu calls private financing. You have a different disposition to maintaining, you know, this regular maintenance of our refineries.
Well, I look at the refineries as more of an asset for NNPC. And I believe that we should always put NNPC in the picture. They become the negotiator of whatever they want to do. Because if you strip someone of all his assets, then the power to go out there and negotiate disappears. So I personally, and I might be wrong, don't believe we should sell the refineries. Because I've always believed that Nigerians have competent professionals. What we have not been able to have is a team approach to solving our problems, where most of the things that we do are personality driven. And then when that personality that is driving it is gone, it's more or less like a begin again. And that's also my problem with IJV. In fact, just as you see that some of the biggest challenge NNPC has is their agency role. The agency role of NNPC has dominated very much of their way of thinking, rather than the commercial role. And that's why I see what will happen when you have IJV. NNPC devotes too much of its time working on JV and working on petroleum policy to a large extent. And I believe that that stops them from being able to do exactly what they are meant to do. Because I'm government, and I'm giving money to JV and IJV, and they're bringing me a lot of revenue. And I'm giving money to NNPC, but they're not giving me the type of revenue I'm getting from my JV. So every time there's money, it's going to go to JV. And that has handicapped, in my opinion, the potential that NNPC could have unleashed. I mean, look at the contemporary of NNPC, PDVSA, Petrobras,
Yes.
Kuwait National Oil. All of them started about the same time. We cannot even go and help Ghana and be an exploring corporation there. So that's my take with respect to IJV, and my take with respect to selling off the asset of NNPC and just making them blare. And the only thing they'll be having, and I know that the Honorable Minister said that they moved from 60,000 barrels to 250,000 barrels by MPDC. What proportion of it are equity oil?
Nobody's ever said go sell refineries. It's one of the options on the table. And it's a chance to be made by NNPC as a corporation, whether carrying those assets makes sense for it.
So
certainly,
private financing, what does that mean?
No, P2P simply means that you're looking for private sector money, which a good corporation will do. A good corporation doesn't go to cap behind the government and say, look, give me 10 billion, I want to go and repair a refinery. Give me 5 million tomorrow, I want to go. No. It doesn't do that. It goes out and says, this is my books, this is my P&L. I want to take a loan. I want to look at my refining segment, because I think it can make me money. So what I insisted when I was there was that I'm not going to do a turnaround maintenance again in which I go cap in hand to the Federal Executive Council to say, give me money. No, it's a business. Go out and show your P&L, show that you can live at 90% performance levels for the refinery. You have incremental volumes that will enable you to pay those debts. So we advertise it. It was robustly. One of the things that happens in this country, which is very good, is that Nigerians quite frankly, they eat up opportunities. They are hungry for opportunities. They go for it. Well, we're not one of those docile countries. And so once we did that, tons and tons of advertisement. Today, the issue is not whether there is money to be had. The issue is whether the terms, whether NNPC was able to finalize acceptable terms for them. And I think that what I've said to them is that it is not an issue of whether you find acceptable terms, that you must find acceptable terms. Because that's what your colleagues and compatriots will do. If you didn't have government backing, that's what you would do. You would say, oh, we didn't reach terms, so we're going to leave this into light comatose.
Okay, our time is almost spent, so I'll just ramp up some of the questions I have. One is on, of course, like Dr. Kachikwu, you said, crude oil export is no longer fashionable. What is now is, of course, export of refined products, which is, you say, that's the way to go. I'm wondering what is in place to scale up, refining capacity.
A lot is in place. We haven't done well in terms of having to get our own refineries back on because NNPC hasn't finalized its negotiations. I'd like to push them on that. But in terms of the refining environment, a lot has happened.
Okay.
The fact that Dangote is almost finishing his refinery is because of the policies, because of the drives, because of handholding, it's because of the fiscal incentives that are given. 650,000 barrels capacity. The modulars, about 10 of them, 3 are basically constructing, ready to go.
Yes.
7 have reached largely FID basis and are finalizing stages. So if you finish all that, that's under 200,000 barrels of segmented 10,000 barrels type capacity. So if you look at it from the point of view of zero refining in 2015, July, August, when I came in, to what is the future outlook today? The future outlook today is that at the minimum, over the next 2 years, you have 850,000 barrels. And if we can work hurriedly, which we must, on the 4 refineries that are owned by NNPC, that's under 400,000 barrels. And so my issue was to separate refining growth in policies from just NNPC refinery. Whenever we say refinery, everybody just looks, you didn't bring back these refineries. How about the ones that are almost being finished? They're not just there because there's an investor. Dangote doesn't stay investing. If the environment is hostile and is not seeing support from government, he will not do it. He will take it somewhere else and export to you. So the refining environment has been substantially improved with a future outlook that is very positive. And that future outlook is in fact compelling NNPC and putting them under a lot of pressure to bring back their own refineries on time. Now, I won't say go sell, but will I say you won't have a relationship? It may well be that as they look at this, they might say to a Dangote or anybody, look, we have 100% shareholding here. If you can come in and take 30% and work with us and change our management.
You're projecting 1.2 million barrels.
Yes, if the 4 refineries come on stream, if Dangote is 600, if the 200 comes on stream, it's over 1.2.
In 2020?
No, I'm not giving you a date. No, because as a nation, we're too conscious of dates and deadlines. I can't determine the pace at which I don't head negotiation teams for NNPC, so I can't tell you when they will finish that. But I definitely want to push them to hurry because the longer you stay, the more scrappy your own business becomes.
Okay.
If Dangote comes
I'd like you to
block.
quickly, before I bring in Professor Iledare to round up, I'd like the former Minister of State for Petroleum to speak to the issue of the search for oil prospects and of course, inland basins, and how much interest, of course, the private sector has shown. Where are we at the moment? As well as the gas commercialization policy. I'd just like you to take the two of them quickly.
Very quickly, gas commercialization was driven by environmental consent, and our issue was, we've done quite a lot, 5% gone in terms of gas flare exit, 25% to go. But a lot of that is through gas reinjection. And the remaining 25%, using oil companies would always say, look, we have our own money, but NNPC doesn't have its counterpart funding. So we say, look, you know what? If you can't deal with it on a 100% counter funding basis, we're going to bring in third parties who have the ability to put in money, take the flare, and turn it into something else. Once we advertise that, funny enough, a lot of oil companies who already said they have money say, oh, no, we have our own procurement. We've found 2 or 3 companies who can work with us. That's fine. The whole idea is not contractual opportunities, it's exiting flare, and also being able to turn the flare into advantages. So right now, they went through a bid process. They've selected potential flare site takers, some from the oil companies, some from the commercial private sectors, and we've set targets that would like to exit flare anywhere between 2020 and 2021. Now, the United Nations deadline, of course, is 2030. So a lot of that is being done. That will help the environment in the areas, like you mentioned, bias and the areas where people live, where flare is going on. It creates work opportunities, it creates business earnings opportunities. So that's ongoing and it's going very well. The
search for oil.
The search for oil continues. I know that we've done quite a lot of, NNPC has done quite a lot of activity in the inland basins. I've never believed that you cannot find oil in a Lake Chad. Across the road from Lake Chad, we're producing oil. But it's got to depend substantially on your seismic data results. All right, so NNPC is the determinant as the business for that. If they decide that, look, based on the studies that they see, there's oil somewhere, they have a duty to go after it. I ultimately think that the model would need to change. If you look at the rate at which public oil companies find oil, it's fairly poor all over the world. Private oil companies, even with Saudi Arabia, what they do is put a private oil company, buy the results of that research and exploration, and then they go into production. We need to find a way of creating the right incentives for fairly big or medium-scale private sector companies to go in there and find oil. In Niger, for example, oil is found by the Chinese, so we need to do that.
Okay, Professor Iledare, I'm quoting, you were something you were reported to have said. The fears you express that even with the technology that is being deployed, we might be chasing the wind. You were quoted to have said that with respect to the search for oil in inland basins. What are your thoughts about it? What are the economic viability, in that?
Well, I'm sure we've been doing this for many years, and we've not come up with anything. We've gone to Lake Chad. We even went to Bauchi. We discovered gas there, and Anambra Basin and Benue Trough. But I must confess that we must not leave any basin unexplored, and it's the responsibility of the government. But the issue, because normally private companies will not get an oil exploration license unless there are certain terms that is going to, because if you discover oil with an exploration license, the government may not necessarily give it to you. But the government could develop a model that will not necessarily task the what I call the cash surplus that the corporation may have to go to places where the likelihood of finding something is 20%.
Okay.
Well, again, when we say likelihood, the fact that it's 20%, 80% chance that you will not get something does not mean you will not get something.
Cannot venture.
What I've always advocated, and that's my biggest challenge in Nigeria, when we make economic decisions, sentiment and patronage should not be the basis.
Okay, I'll put you on hold there. Finally, you were president, like we said earlier, you have been twice, president of the African Petroleum Producers Organization and president Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Beyond international politics that revolves around it, what are we expecting? What's the value that is conferred on this?
It helps us in OPEC drive the philosophy of pricing and crude management. That's what got us the price. I was president then. Saudi Arabia was after me, and then obviously it was after them, and they followed that same track. And I was able to midwife the relationship, or rather the dispute between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and it was that. So everybody stepped back from this whole big shoulder quarrels. And we had to address OPEC because OPEC was literally dying. So we did that. So obviously the presidency there helped. It also helped us put a Secretary General who's running the place efficiently, who's a Nigerian in place. It has helped us in terms of the gas policies that you see us being enacted. In fact, our gas flare commercialization has been adopted by United Nations and has now been touted to the world that this is a model through which you can go. For Apple, my issue is market. Nigeria stands to benefit from developing Apple membership markets. Because if America is out of the market, Japan is finding technology cars and electric efficient cars. India is saying that over the next 7 years, it wants to begin to walk away from, So if we're going to do that, then we have to look at where is the market going to be for this crude that we're producing. Africa has to be the base. It's closer, it's more integrated, it makes a lot more sense. And so I began to therefore revolutionize Apple. Began to restructure it, and that's why they kept this presidency with me for 2 years. In fact, 3 years, this is the third year run.
Okay, in less than 30 seconds, Professor Iledare, what is the outlook for 2019 in the next agenda? Do we have a brighter outlook for the petroleum industry?
No, I've always believed that Nigeria professionals in the oil and gas industry are competent, and they can take us to any level that we desire, if we let them. And who are the we?
All right. Dr. Kachikwu.
I mean, the future. I mean, oil industry, 2019 outlook is not outlooks in oil industry is 5 to 10 years. So 2019, we're already there. I would say the current outlook is fantastic, but future outlook is amazing. And I agree with him. The skill sets are there. The financing possibilities are there. We just need to drive them through meaningful policies and legislation to get to the next level.
All right, Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachikwu, former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The pleasure is always mine to have you. Professor Iledare, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for obliging me. I called you within a very short period and you were here earlier on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you too for joining me and of course for watching. I am Claire Delabo Abdul-Razak on behalf of my production crew. Bye-bye.